So the women's elite field gathering back there at Blackheath. And the headline story really in the women's race this year: can Mary Keitany become the 4th woman to win the London Marathon for a 3rd occasion? Keitany there, 3 from the left, wearing the black vest.
So away from introducing to you the women's elite field, let's welcome them all onto the start line. There will be British challengers for the World Championships as well. We're going to introduce 5 of the very biggest names to you and wish them all the best. This is probably the greatest women's field that the London Marathon has ever seen.
So Mary Keitany leading the entrance. Gianni Demadonna also there of Ethiopia. Look out for her. Jo Pavey, now into her 40s, seeking selection for yet another major championship. Charlotte Purdue, perhaps the future in this event where Great Britain is concerned.
Yes, very much somebody who has come through the ranks, the age groups.
So Vivian Chariot, Olympic champion at 5,000 metres. We know she's got the leg speed. Tigis Tuffa, former champion. Here is Keitany.
With hit number 105, it's the Rio Olympic Marathon bronze medalist from Ethiopia, Gianni Demadonna. The double Olympic track champion from Ethiopia, Tirunesh Dibaba.
Tirunesh Dibaba, one of the greats of women's distance running on the track now.
Let's hear it for Charlotte Purdue.
Here is Charlotte Purdue, rubbing shoulders with some of the sport's great names. Jo Pavey comes back for more.
Moving their toes behind the all-important white line. Correct distance, of course, here. IAAF measured. And there's the starters, our double Olympic rowing gold medalists, Helen Glover and Heather Stanning, getting things underway for the 2017 Virgin Money London Marathon. Great anticipation, and the plunger goes down.
So just a reminder, Jemima Sungong, the Olympic champion, defending champion, not here. She was supposed to be in the field, but then she failed a drugs test a few weeks ago. Despite that, though, we have a very strong women's elite field. The black and white striped vest there with the red piping, the colours of Shaftesbury Barnet Harriers. That really a nod to Dave Bedford, the man who for years and years has put together the elite field here. The function of the Shaftesbury Barnet vests here, well, they're not running in the British League. What they are doing is they are the role of pacemakers. So the black and white striped vest with the red piping, to those from the track and field fraternity, those are the colours of Shaftesbury Barnet Harriers. I suppose if you're a football fan, it's more, what, Juventus or perhaps Newcastle United. Look out for those black and white striped vests. They are the official pacemakers.
And there's such a distinction when you look at usually the one-coloured vests of the international athletes. Number of paced groups. Over this next mile, you'll see 3 distinct groups, maybe more starting to form. They'll all have negotiated what time they want to go off, how they want to run the race strategically, faster second half, faster first half. Some of it let it for the morning, and then there's the feel-good factor, or not, on the day.
But there's no doubt that in the women's race, the bar is being hung very high in terms of expectations. The leading group we expect to, or at least the target is, to go through halfway in something like 69 minutes, which, if you have even splits over the 2 halves, which is very possible, you'd see the athletes coming through in 2 hours 18, which is world class. Meanwhile, up in the region of the Cutty Sark, here go the wheelchair athletes. The front has been And the workload has been shared around over the course of the first few miles. David Weir, where he likes to be there, close to the front, but not at the front. At the moment, lying in fourth place.
And they'll all have been glad to successfully negotiate around the cul-de-sac, around the bows there. There are ramps, there's twists, there's turns. Now they back down to river level. They've come from over 50 metres high on the common right down now just to a couple of metres, and now it's fairly flat along the Jamaica road, so they can really get into their game plans now, although there's still a lot strung out behind the leaders there.
Yes, through the first 3 miles, the athletes go to the most eastern point of the course on the south of the river part of the course before turning back and making their way towards the bridge in the City of London. So they're heading, as Steve says, towards Jamaica Road.
A little bit of a deviation around Surrey Quays, which will have to be a little alert for the brick paviours. Some great aerial shots there. I'll check in their watches.
Yes, Mary Katani showing prominently towards the front. That's the first of the pacemakers there at the moment. That is Caroline Kip-Karui.
And you mentioned a halfway split there. Of course, we've got 4 ladies in this field who have all gone under 2 hours 20 previously. So it's a mouth-watering sort of field that... Are they all on form today? This is the questions that the next 2 hours, 2 and a bit hours will sort out.
Well, if they're going through the first half at the sharp end of the field in 69 minutes, that certainly is going to test these athletes. So let's identify 1 or 2 of those towards the front of the field. You can see Gianni Dibaba, world champion from Beijing. 18 months or so ago now. She's immediately behind Ketani. That's, or should I say 2 behind Ketani. You can see Florence Kiplagat, former world cross-country champion, there in 3rd place. That's her wearing the white vest. She's a world half marathon champion as well, and the Kenyan record holder at the 10,000 metres, so she's got a fair range of distances. Tigist Tufa, one of the Ethiopians in this field, wearing the sky blue vest, the yellow shoes towards the outside there.
They'll be approaching the first mile marker. When Paula did set the course record here, it was a little bit over 5 minutes. So they'll just be approaching that any second. And there it is, the familiar red and white arch, indicating 5:15, solid but not too ambitious at this early stage.
Yes, we're certainly getting an idea of the tempo when they start running into the 3rd and 4th miles, but traditionally this is a very fast start to a marathon, isn't it?
It is. It's very straight, flat, fluid, and as mentioned earlier, slightly downhill, so a lot of these athletes will just be taking in that drop of elevation. It's worth a couple of seconds a mile that you don't want to waste. But in essence, they're all in their comfort zone now. They're just watching each other, just all staying in that race bubble. They're just getting the early miles out the way. Different things be going through their minds.
So it is Caroline Kip-Karui wearing the vest of Shaftesbury Barnet Harriers, the leading pacemaker out in front. Keitani there in 2nd place. In 3rd at the moment is Florence Kiplagat. Then it's Gianni Dibaba in 4th place. A tall athlete wearing the royal blue vest. That's Hella Kiprop, a World Championship silver medalist from Beijing 18 months ago, when she finished just a 2nd behind Dibaba. So already this race taking shape. They're into the 2nd mile. They've been going for, as you can see there, 6.5 minutes, just a little more than that. This is that long stretch down to the most easterly point of this London Marathon. Swimming pool over there on the left. And this is going back to the 2nd group. 1-2-1, that is Charlotte Purdue wearing 119, that's Alison Dixon. So there's very much the British group
A lot at
Joe
stake.
Pavey on the left there wearing 116.
Sorry, and a lot at stake obviously with the World Championships here in London, on a London course as well.
So the women's race underway in London. Well, the women's race has been going for almost 10 minutes in London. Mary Keitany leading the race proper, just behind the pacemaker Caroline Kipkurui. Just to give you some idea of the pace these athletes are expected to cover the first half in, 69 minutes is the pace that Caroline Kipkurui is targeting. Let's just identify some of the other athletes in that leading group. Tirunesh Dibaba, twice an Olympic champion, 3 times a world champion at the 10,000 metres, now in 3rd place behind Keitany. Ebere Kebede, the Ethiopian, also in that leading group, along with Aselefet Mergia, Florence Kiplagat, Mare Dibaba and Tigist Tufa, as well as Hella Kiprop. They are in that second group there, behind Keitany. But Keitany here going out hard. Now this is interesting, isn't it, Steve? Because we've seen her do this before. We've seen her go out and last. And particularly I remember when she ran her first New York Marathon, she went out incredibly hard, but then the wheels came off quite dramatically.
That's right. She's got a lot of experience now behind her, 34 years old, a number of marathons, particularly London, so she knows what she's doing here. There'll have been discussions on the pace. She must be feeling good. The others aren't as enthusiastic on this 5 minutes 15 pace that they're setting out, and I think it may have just crept up on that as well. I think it's gone a little bit faster, and this is why there's a slight drift in the group.
Yes, and to use perhaps a slightly clumsy motoring metaphor, Steve, she hasn't got too many miles on the clock, Mary Keitany. She may be 34, but she was a relatively late starter at this level, and she has had maternity breaks as well. So Mary Keitany making the bid in terms of the race proper to run on her own for more than 2 hours. It's as simple as that. That is what she's looking to do, with the assistance of the pacemaker up until halfway. But if things go to plan for her, she's expecting to run something like the last 10, 11, 12 miles on her own. Now this is incredibly bold. So early. I think many of the aficionados of marathon running would say in London, Steve, that you really don't want to be on your own until you're, well, if anything, turning for home when you're out there at Canary Wharf.
Exactly, all the way back along the highway, along the embankment. It's a long, straight road. Although there's always a lot of enthusiasm and there's a lot of crowds to push you on, it is, as I say, very bold. But let's not forget, she's the second fastest woman ever over the distance. Great experience. She's done all the world's major marathons now, and she has got a bit of help for the 13 miles, but it is worrying worrying. It is a threat that large pack behind is still holding a very good pace, and we all know what can happen in those final 10 kilometres of any marathon.
Yes, and she has yet to reach the 3 mile point. So at the moment she's still in Woolwich. She's got to turn around, come back to towards Charlton, Westcombe Park, Greenwich. Last mile, 4:43. Now that's very fast. We must temper that with the fact that some of these early miles in London are very quick. There are downhill stretches. The route itself lends itself to fast running. But Mary Keitany, who, yes, we are repeating ourselves, is vastly experienced. She should be well aware of that. However, she's certainly run a fast mile there. Keitany out in front, alongside the pacemaker, Kipkurui. There you see confirmation of the splits, 15:30 after 5 kilometres, so that's, what, 3.1 miles.
And she's 17 seconds on that time that Paula Radcliffe set a world record at that point, at this moment. So she's gone out with some intention.
We talk about world records where Paula Radcliffe is concerned. You're talking about pacing there. Which world record are we talking about? Now, before you get confused at home, when we talk about world records in marathon running with the women, we're talking about world record times run in women's only races and world records run in both men's and women's races. Now, Radcliffe has run very fast times in those two different circumstances, hasn't she?
That's right, and that comparison was on the 2005 when it was the women's only, which was the course on the British and the world record. She did a finish time of 2:17:42, and she went through in 15:47. And
so what we're saying is that even on the in the women only record, she's now running Keitany at a faster tempo than Radcliffe was when she set that women's only world record, although it's worth making the point and reinforcing the fact that she has just gone a little more than 3 miles. She's now pushing on towards 4 miles, and the traditional distance, 26 miles, 385 yards. A break there of the rhythm going to the drinks tables. Does it sometimes frustrate you when you watch some of the athletes running that despite their expertise and the amount of time that they do devote to their trade and their art, that when it comes to picking up drinks at drinks tables, they do seem to be do it with the technique of amateurs on occasions?
Yeah, you're right, and I think it is something I would think very few athletes actually practice. Running up to a table, doing it by yourself is a lot more simplistic than doing it in a group, and that's where some of the danger and the worries kind of weaving yourself between athletes. You can see how big and cumbersome the bottles are as well at times. She had no problem finding the distinction there. Bright orange bottle. This is obviously only available to the top athletes. All those bottles will be changed now after the women's, and all the men's will be put out, so there isn't too much of a melee for her at the moment, but they are usually an element of drama often in many championships. But going back to your point, yes, she definitely lost a few seconds there. It could have been taken a little bit more in her stride. She wasn't as relaxed. We could tell moments out that she was looking, adjusting her stride. And obviously she's doing the right thing in taking drink early. There'll be some carbohydrate in there, trying to replenish some of those muscles already. So she's doing all the right things at the moment. But she does look very focused, as we said, not 19 minutes on the clock yet.
Steve, share a few tricks of the trade, one or two of your tricks, or even, dare I say, the odd idiosyncrasy when it came to drinks preparations and how you put them on the tables, how you label them. I mean, what were your peculiar habits, or not necessarily peculiar, but individual habits?
Well, the first thing I always did on mine was put a straw and a flower on the top, just to make sure I could find mine.
Was it a daffodil, perhaps? Steve's Welsh.
Usually just a little bit of a packaging ribbon, but it was something to highlight my bottle above others. Many races give the same bottles out, and for you to be looking for yours in terms of a distinction. And then it depends on the conditions. You would affect your carbohydrate, so the amount of carbohydrate drink, carbohydrate powder that you'd mix in it. You wouldn't, in warmer conditions, you'd have less carbohydrate because you need the water and the hydration to a higher level. Here in a cool spring morning in Britain, you could put your carbohydrate levels a little bit higher up than normal to be replenishing quite early. And then...
And when were those drinks put together? When were they finally prepared?
You put them together the night before. Most races, you give them to the race organisers the night before, and they are refrigerated then, and then taken out usually on motorbikes or on cars, and they are put out on the tables for you. And of course, given today's culture, all those bottles are now very secure and watched over at all times in case they're tampered with in any way. So there's a lot of security in and around that. So she's going for just a plain water there. Maybe she's had the taste of the carbohydrate and she just wants to wash it down. Having a little bit of a problem opening the cap, which can be a problem. Again, we talk about preparation, knowing the type of the bottles. Is it a screw cap? Is it a sports cap? Just a quick little sup.
And that mantra, if you really need a drink, you're almost too late to get a drink, is that a point?
Hydration is a key, and something that's overlooked by so many runners of all abilities.
And Mary Keitany now alongside the pacemaker Caroline Kipkurui. And it is a huge gap. Of course, she's got company now, Steve. She won't have that company, I would have thought, for too long, beyond halfway. Are there any secrets to running on your own? How do you deal with it? I guess the greatest challenge is the mental one, isn't it?
Athletes are different. Some people are very focused, they can get very insular, they can be very confident by themselves. Others are racers, and this is, you know, comes down to, are you a good runner or are you a good racer? Some people like to be head to head, stride for stride. Others can just apply themselves, focus and just concentrate. A little glance at the watch by the pacemaker then, just to make sure she's running to time. Coming up to the 30 minutes, 10k will be the next mark, so about 6 miles on the imperial distance first. But Mary is, as we've said, very experienced. She's thought this through. Maybe she felt a threat with some of the other athletes and wanted to get a buffer ahead of them, feeling she's got enough miles in the bank, enough strength, enough speed, endurance to hold that second half. Because it's the same for all, because this other group is going to come apart, and it's rarely we'll have 2 or 3 ladies together going to the final stage, running her down. But you can see the 6 mile balloon arch just on the end of the road there.
106, Aberika Betty just getting a little bit detached here. 103, that's the back of her Selefet Mergia, the Ethiopian. 108, that's Hela Kiprop. 107, Tirunesh Dibaba, twice the Olympic champion on the track. They're the athletes who are now something like 100 metres down on the road on Mary Keitany, who made that bid, but I think it's a reasonable point here. Having made that kick and opened up that gap very swiftly, it hasn't grown that much, has it? 104, that is Florence Kiplagat. So this is the chasing group, just one athlete caught between the leaders here and Mary Keitany and the pacemaker. We'll catch up with her in a couple of moments' time. But it's something like 100 metres between these 4, this quartet, and the 2 athletes at the front of the field.
And there's somebody trying to bridge the gap in between as well. 30:25 through 6 miles for the chasing pack there. So, as you can see, operating under 5 minutes a mile, or just over 5 minutes a mile at the moment. 5:05 for this group. So Keitany must be operating around about that 5 minutes a mile mark. 3 minutes 7 seconds a kilometre. Very fast.
So they've been running just half an hour, and the makeup of this women's field, well, it looks more like the distribution across the road with the leading group. It's more as if they're running in the last half hour of the race, frankly, than the opening half hour. There you can see 31:17 through 10 kilometres. Vivian Chariot is the chaser there. She is the athlete who's caught between the 2 of them.
And again, incredible statistics. She is now a minute up on Paula's record time. Paula went through in 32 minutes 17 seconds for 10 kilometres.
Yes, Vivian Chariot, I think, showing maybe a little bit of inexperience, making her marathon debut. The newly crowned Olympic champion at the 5,000 metres. There you can see her wearing those fluorescent yellow socks. But you would have thought, Steve, that she has to pay for this pace at some point in the second half of the race. She's looking relaxed now. You'd expect that of an athlete who feels good and has been only running for barely half an hour. There you can see one of the officials just trying to guide Keitany and the pacemaker, Caroline Kipkurui. There is Vivian Chariot, who really has got herself in a position which I suppose no experienced marathon runner would want to be in. not in front, but not with the pursuers either. So she's very much on her own.
Yes. She's stuck in no man's land, can't quite get up to this lead group. Mary, of course, already in 2017 has run 65.13. She was close behind the then world record of 65.06 of Chepchira. So she's in good shape this year. Mary, she's obviously come into this with a lot of confidence. She's been training hard. Must feel that she has the miles in the bank. Must probably been at altitude.
Yeah, she is a former world half marathon record holder, and if we look at what's been going on in women's distance running over the course of the last few weeks and months, the fastest marathon in the world this year, Sarah Chepchirchir, when she ran 2:19.47 in winning the Tokyo Marathon over the last weekend in February. But where we really have seen the headlines made has been in the half marathon distance, where we've seen two remarkable world records.
And exactly, and that's the indicator. If, you know, when the 10-kilometer distances, when the half marathon distances start to fall, it's just a matter of time before those marathon distances fall. You see the chasing pack with the pacers, and there's a lot of stuttering there.
Yes, and once again we talk about that rather clumsy technique that some of these athletes tend to use to get their drinks bottles. Tigges Tufa on her own. That won't have been part of the game plan as she comes round Cuddy Sark. I can only assume she's had one or two problems because she's very detached, and it's far too early in the race, you would have thought, to be losing that sort of ground.
Yes, she's not looking too comfortable.
So Ketani with the pacemaker, Caroline Kip-Karui. Just to talk about those half marathon records for a couple of moments. Peres Jepchirchir, both records broken by Kenyans. Jepchirchir running 1:05.06 in Ras Al Khaimah. That's one of the Emirates. That was over the second weekend. I say weekend, I think it was on a Friday, wasn't it? In February. And then Jocelyn Jepkosgei, who broke 4 world records, well, 3 world records on her way to breaking the 4th. In Prague on April Fool's Day, and I think one or two people thought it was a bit of an April Fool's joke because some of the timings there were so remarkable from an athlete who, whilst on the radar, was not a particularly bright light on the radar. Jepkosgei running 1:04.52, so breaking Jepchirchir's world record by 14 seconds and setting world records at 5 kilometres, 10 kilometres, 15 kilometres, on her way to breaking that world half marathon record. We saw Joe Pavey there in a group some way back on the road, but that is the race for selection for Great Britain's world marathon squad for the World Championships in London, and that, as you'd expect, an additional incentive to get a British vest, the fact that Great Britain is hosting those World Championships in London. And this route doesn't go terribly far away from the Olympic Stadium.
And Jo, of course, will uniquely, if she does make that marathon team, have competed at a world level for Britain from 1,500 metres at every distance up to the marathon, which would be an incredible feat. Mother of 2 now, and still mixing it with the best. She has her work cut out. Susan Partridge, Charlotte Purdue was taking on a lot of liquid. Although it's cool, you still need the nutrition and some of the hydration. Mary, 10 marathons. Of course, she fell in this race last year.
In preparation for the start of the men's race, they'll be going off in the next few minutes. But we are, as we were at the front of the women's race, well, as we go past a familiar bookmaking chain or one of their outlets down there in southeast London, Mary Keitany, I'm not quite sure whether you describe her as an odds-on favourite at this point. She has got a very impressive lead, however,
it's a gamble.
It does raise questions. It is a gamble, isn't it?
It's a high-risk gamble. She's taken it. There's no way back now. She's obviously got the intention of putting a world mark out there, and she's gone for it. Meanwhile,
hi, my name's Tanya.
the champ.
Vincent, Thomas, this is my wife Laura. Sorry.
You can see the championship runners being brought behind the elite. Just slowly being walked up. They'll have been up there for an hour or two. Many of these put their bags in the various buses and the transport systems that make all this Virgin London Marathon happen. The elite, of course, will be a bus up there early. Will have had a marquee alongside the start line. So the British Championship protagonists in the group behind, and behind them will then be the hundreds of meters on this red start. 3 starts being used.
So a men's elite field being led by Kenenisa Bekele, one of the athletes who I guess could justifiably slip into the mantle of being the world's greatest ever distance runner. There might be 1 or 2 others who have claims, the likes of Haile Gebrselassie, who certainly in my money would be, for my money, would still be the man who wears that particular mantle. Mo Farah's record when it comes to major games is without parallel, but Gebrselassie, in terms of the longevity and the range of distances and surfaces, does separate him from many of the rest. Well, there will be a royal send-off today for the men's field. So the London Marathon field, Kenenisa Bekele is the most prominent entrant, seeking to win his first London Marathon title. Came very close to breaking the world record in Berlin last year. Fell just 6 seconds short. We haven't seen a men's world record in London for 15 years. Could today be the day? I think most people, most aficionados recognise that London isn't quite the quickest route of all the major city marathons. It would seem that Berlin is now regarded as the fastest of the routes. So the Royals there, whose own charity is closely linked with the London Marathon this year. So, here are the men at the sharp end. Kenenisa Bekele, top of the list. Faisa Lilesa, also of Ethiopia. We've seen him run well prominently here before. Scott Overall leads the British Challenge along with Chris Thompson. Gianni Demadonna, we just saw a couple of moments ago. There's Koroki. Abel Karui, 2:05 man. So here is Lilesa, world bronze medalist back in 2011, Olympic silver medalist last year. So there he is. Kenenisa Bekele, the Ethiopian, world record holder at both the 5,000 metres and the 10,000 metres. There's Scott Overall. So we're all set to go in the men's race. And the Royal Triumvirate will get the men's elite field going. So Steve, so much of the pre-race hype about Kenenisa Sabadell had a setback when he ran the Dubai Marathon at the start of the year. Tipped up when he was involved in a coming together between himself and one of the pacemakers. He got up and ran again, but the break in the rhythm and one or two bumps and bruises meant that he pulled out along the way. Is this race just about Kenenisa Sabadell?
I think he starts as odds-on favourite. However, if he is not fully fit, last year he wasn't quite on top form. Still had a fantastic third place. But behind him are some hungry athletes, a lot of experience. One for me, Daniel Wanjuru. He destroyed his personal best by 3 minutes and set a course record in Amsterdam last autumn, making his London debut. Will that play into his hands? I don't know, but it's going to be a cracking race. The pacemakers will take it out as they've been pre-ordered. A number of groups, as we'll see, form the familiar Shaftesbury Barnet vests, as we mentioned there. A sea of them, in fact, at the moment.
Yes, between them, though, at the front, you can see Beckley wearing the white vest there. Certainly a name I'd like to pick out, Gurme Gebrselassie, who's got Gurme rather than his family name on his bib. You can see him over there, wearing the same colours as Beckley, the white vest and the dark shorts. Still just 21, stunning victory when he won the world title in Beijing 18 months ago. But he does have a habit of running big races when it matters, not just that victory in Beijing when he won the world title. He came 4th in the Olympic Games last year. He's also around that, come 4th here in 2016, so 12 months ago. So he knows the course well. And he was also the winner in November of the New York City Marathon. So he has form at winning championship races and winning big city marathon events. So perhaps if there is a major threat to Kenenisa Sabadell, looking very smooth as he always does at the front of the field, it's the man wearing identical colours just behind him, over on the far side there. That's Gurme Gebrselassie, the Eritrean.
And very much with age on his side as well. Became world champion at just the age of 19.
Yes, one or two question marks, weren't there, about his actual age and date of birth. We had to see the expression apparently when he was a teenager mentioned. Merikatani there behind the pacemaker, but the chasers now disappearing into the distance behind her. But if you consider she's still in the opening half of the race, she's been there running long enough, Steve, to get an idea of the tempo. But again, the questions must remain about how long can she sustain it. You've been doing your homework on the numbers and the times. What sort of tempo is she moving at?
Well, she just went through the last mile in 5:14. The last major kilometre split, 15 kilometres, she went through in a staggering 47:15, which is still well over a minute ahead of what Paula ran back in 2005. So,
and that was when she set the world record in a women's only race.
That's right. Under 16 minutes for the last 5 kilometres. So she's still banging out that pace very consistently. She looks like she's in a rhythm now, but we know she's still got a long way to go. 27 kilometres.
So those supporters of Paula Radcliffe need not fret too much just yet. Still in the first half of the race. The black and white striped vest, a red piping there as Shaftesbury Barnet Harriers. They're not members of the club, they're here as pacemakers. That's what it means in this event. Kenenisa  running well within himself in second place. Well, here we can look at the last 5 winners of the men's race here in London, and look at that. If we look at the consistency of the times there, 2:03, 2:04, and I guess that's a measure of how marathon running has moved on. Dare I say, Steve, in your day, you could run 2:8, 2:9 and win this race.
It's the progression of mankind, isn't it? You know, we get better, the shoes get better, understanding diet, nutrition, and what we're seeing now are very finely honed athletes targeting events, you know, months, weeks, months out, and these guys are now got scheduled that are bringing them to the start lines of these major events in peak form. Some courses are a bit faster than others. We heard, you know, Berlin is fairly recognised as a little bit faster than London, but you know, in terms of a scenic tour of a city, you know, London has the ebb and flow both in through the boroughs, the river, all the facets of an international city.
But I'm going to talk in lavish understatement here. 2:08, 2:09. That's not shabby. But to run 2:3, 2:4, that is a huge leap forward, isn't it?
It's a mile. So, you know,
it is literally a mile.
It is literally a mile further up the road. The winners of the 2:08 days would be at 25 miles.
And the perennial debate, this sub-2-hour experiment, which people do seem to be devoting a lot of time and effort to. Of course, it is a stunning landmark to even think that it may be possible for a human being to break 2:03 on an officially, 2 hours I should say, on an officially ratified course. I mean, that is another, what, almost 3/4 of a mile faster than they're running these days. I mean, how realistic is that?
It will happen. Will it happen in our lifetime? I don't know. But it comes down to, as I mentioned earlier, the compartmentalization. You get your 5 kilometers faster. That means your 10 kilometers become faster. We've seen, you know, the progress in the half marathon, which is the real sort of yardstick of progress against the marathon, and the abilities to run that very efficient second half. How close can they get? We all know even pace running is the way to run. Having groups like this, getting that race bubble, as I mentioned so often, it's very important. And the human body is being pushed and pressed, and we're seeing now athletes finely tuned than ever before.
And this is the track and field equivalent, really, of the bunching that you have in cycling, isn't it? Meanwhile, Mary Keitany, alongside the pacemaker Caroline Kipkurui, where she's been pretty much throughout, approaching the hour mark, and of course the most significant split that we shall see up to this point will be halfway. And consider that Caroline Kipkurui was asked to reach halfway in 69 minutes. So the women's race in the London Marathon, Mary Keitany alongside the pacemaker Caroline Kipkurui. The gap in the front, well, it's opening, if not with every stride, certainly progressively over this opening 10 or 12 miles. Keitany, twice a winner already, and we can see there the reigning Olympic champion on the track is being caught. That's Vivian Chariot, and she's being passed by the athlete wearing 108. That's Hella Kiprop. And also a couple of athletes in front of her. So I think the inexperience of Vivian Chariot has told here. She spent an awful lot of time running on her own. Kenenisa Bekele in the men's race. Germe Gebrselassie, you can see with that familiar forward lean there in the middle. But it's still a big bunch in the men's field. One or two little sharp rises in this opening phase in the men's race after those opening first 3 miles, but as they turn back towards Woolwich, towards the Cuddy Sark, Greenwich and beyond, one or two little sharp rises. I've just been up one of those, and again a little bit of fumbling and breaking of tempo as the athletes go to the drinks table. One of the athletes has stopped and he's running backwards. Now that is ludicrous. Surely that is madness.
Yes.
You lose up to 100 metres.
Well, he's lost the group now. He's either picked up the wrong bottle or missed it entirely.
So Mary Katani making her way ever closer towards halfway, and she's now on her own. And consider that the pacemaker was asked to cover the opening half in 69 minutes. Well, it'll be interesting to see just how quick Keitani is at halfway, because perhaps the pacemaker was unable to keep up with the distance and the tempo that she'd been asked to produce, or maybe, just maybe, Keitani's running faster than that.
And I think it's the latter. I imagine that little pull-up over Tower Bridge, the pacemaker just hasn't been able to keep up with the pace.
So just looking here at some of the wheelchair athletes. The men's race, well, we certainly don't want to leave that for too long, because it is incredibly close. The favourite in the women's race, Manuela Shah. These are some of the chasers in the men's event. Something like half a minute behind the leading group as they make their way towards Westminster. So, still relative calm in the men's race. Kenenisa Bekele. I did mention those early splits. Now, we saw an unofficial split, and I shall stress unofficial, Steve, but the split through 5 kilometres was alarmingly quick. How much credence can we put in that?
14:11. I think, talking about the downward nature of the course, it is a very credible split. Last year, Kipchoge went through in 14:16. Because of that drop in elevation. But when you compare it to some of the Berlin and the splits of the world record pace, then it is vastly superior.
Because it is. I mean, if you simply do the maths, I mean, that's a 2-hour marathon.
It is, but it's not going
to happen.
It's not going to be maintained. 14:11 for the first 5k for a marathon is amazing.
But what it means here, that Bekele is conceivably, and not only Bekele, but one or two other athletes, can perhaps target, or maybe are targeting, a world record.
It's going to be attrition. You know, the momentum with this number of runners, a strong pace group as well. They're on an ambitious schedule. One of the pacemakers already starting to drop off the back.
I like your slightly sort of understated euphemistic references.
But this is why they've got 4.
An ambitious schedule.
But this is why they've got 4 pacemakers here. You know, there is a little bit of slippage. And this is world-class running at any level. You know, even over 5-10 kilometres distance. You know, this is, 28-minute pace for 10k. But they will be winning track races here. They're going through, and the first 5k of a marathon.
And the reason why you're also tempering things with realism is the very fact that, yes, these may be the world's best athletes, but the last 10 kilometres of a marathon hurts them every bit as much as it hurts the likes of me and one or two others.
It does, but people understand training more. They now know what they have to do to really become an efficient running machine in the last 10 kilometres. We all know we've got natural reserves to run 18, 20 miles. It's that last 10 kilometres, and we're getting to understand the bodies, the mechanics, far more of the nutrition it gives.
So, Mary Katani. Some of the narrow streets here north of the river as she makes her way towards the east. Heading out towards Canary Wharf, she'll see the tall buildings, the skyscrapers there in the area which, in terms of its development, this part of London really almost charts the history of the race, going back to the early 80s when much of this part of the course was underdeveloped, some of it, of course, in a state of dereliction, really. So the pacemaker still showing prominently at the front of this field in the men's race. They'll be going for almost half an hour. Kenenisa Bekele, where he's been pretty much throughout, tucked in between and behind the pacemakers. Alongside him is Germe Gebrselassie, the reigning world champion, wearing the same colour vest as Bekele.
So,
well, the bike goes one way and the course goes the other.
yes, with the ramps and the twists at the front of the bows of the Cutty Sark, they don't risk the bikes having difficulties with the lead runners.
So looking out over there, bottom of the picture, that is Blackheath, the start area, and looking over the other side towards Canary Wharf, which is where the women's field at the moment are making their way. The men, though, still south of the river, alongside the Cutty Sark. They've been going for just over half an hour, and at the moment they're going on record pace.
Yes, 28.51 through the 10-kilometre mark for the lead pace runners there. So it's still holding up well against last year's course record time. Just slipped outside the 28.37 of Kipchoge.
Yes, well, they've been asked to go through the halfway mark, and they're looking the leading group targeting something close to 2 hours and 3. So they're looking for something like 61.5 minutes at halfway. But on the evidence of those very early splits, that looks quite a modest prediction. Every chance they might even go quicker than that, although we do have to stress that 1 or 2 of these early miles in London are very, very fast indeed. Let's identify 1 or 2 of the pacemakers for you, shall we? Leading pacemaker, Stephen Cabet. He's a 2-hour 8 marathon runner, and that's the point we do have to keep on stressing, is that many of these pacemakers in their own right are outstanding athletes.
A number of them will be doing in preparation for future marathons. A lot of these guys will be going on to other big city marathons, so they're just getting a half marathon pace in their legs, not going into that red zone of beyond the 30-kilometre mark.
So Cabet wearing pacemaker 1.
So back to Mary Keitany, 1:19.43 through 25 kilometres. She's still powering on. Still, as a comparison, I'm sorry to keep using this comparison, but it's the only one we've got for a women's only race here on the course. But going back to Paula, she went through in 1:21.03, so she's still well up on Paula. There's a little bit of distress in the face. However, she is very comfortable with the very efficient running style, quite a high arm carriage.
And of course, we do have to make the point that Paula Radcliffe, when she ran that time, was running on her own as well. It was the women's only race rather than the mixed field, in which she ran even faster. So Keitany and Radcliffe both had to run for the last hour pretty much alone. And that is what Keitany is doing now. And bear in mind, having been on the road for 1 hour and 21 minutes, it's a long time that she's been out there running essentially solo. She lost the pacemaker before halfway, but she will now have to run for almost 1 hour more, so there's still an awful lot of this race to go. Last mile 4:43 for the men. They're through 8 miles. Bekele and Gebrselassie both wearing the white vest there with the scarlet trim and the dark shorts. Another of the athletes we can see there wearing the blue, that's Daniel Wanjiro, the Amsterdam Marathon winner from the end of last year. He was an impressive winner of that race, but London is stepping up another couple of gears. There's still plenty of men in this leading group. Also Abel Karui, you can see the tall figure towards the back. He's wearing the white vest as well. Faisa Lilesa, familiar gait of his, the Olympic silver medalist from Rio. He's on the far right, wearing that almost orange vest, really. So still plenty of men looking reasonably relaxed behind the three pacemakers. Those three pacemakers. Stephen Kibet wearing pace 1. Morris Gashaga, you can see there on the right. He's another Kenyan there wearing pacemaker 2, and between them wearing pace 4, that's John Lotiang. So Wanjiro there wearing the blue vest. Germa Gebrselassie just alongside him. Kenenisa Bekele tucked in behind the three pacemakers. But still a leading group along with the pacemakers of about 10 athletes. Also there, Faisali Lessa, obscured at the moment, but towards the back. Also in that leading group, Abel Karui, 2 times a world champion, also an Olympic silver medalist in London, not on this course, of course, that going back to 2012. Asefa Mengetsu of Ethiopia, he's also in that leading group.
So back live here at 2017 Virgin Money London Marathon, 3rd place.
But look at some of the names there. Priska Jeptu, Edna Kiplagat, Tigis Tufa. Look at those times. Ketani running 2:18:37, and she won here in 2012. If she carries on this sort of tempo, well, there's every chance she'll run faster than that.
Yeah, a lot faster. Our last split that we had for the 25 kilometers, 1:19:43, which is very impressive.
And if you stretch that out to the full 26 miles, 385 yards, what sort of possible time are we looking at, Steve?
Well, that's going to bring her around about the 2:15, 2:16 if she continues this pace and this pattern. But we do know that fatigue will start setting in, and it's how much fatigue, how last year, but also in previous years here in London. Just a little bit of a drop there under the metro lines.
Well, she's so familiar with the route here that there will be landmarks, and I'm not just talking about the traditional landmarks that you and I know when we go and visit London. There will be landmarks on the route, and certainly I would have thought when she gets a sense that she's turning for home, which she will do fairly soon, because this is now the most easterly point north of the river. There will come a point when she turns and she makes her way heading back towards the City of London. She'll leave the high rises of Canary Wharf behind, partially retrace her steps. She'll start to see 1 or 2 athletes coming back in the opposite direction, because the return part of this north of the river eastern loop, if you like, the 2 sides of the road come very close to one another. Then she'll head back towards the Tower of London, through the City of London, along the embankment, and then towards Westminster. Now, I'm sure there will be little lifts along the way that she will, perhaps in her mind now, be breaking this race down into stages and thinking, right, let's just get to this point, then let's get to that point. This is a section of the course which year on year changes all the time. You can see evidence of construction, which is almost continuous out in this part of the world. But this is a fairly lonely stretch. But the numbers will build up as she moves back towards the City of London, and when she particularly hits the, which really is where runners come at you in all directions when you get around the tower.
That's right. As you said, the significant point is just after 21. She'll rejoin the highway when she gets those runners in both directions. That'll be a big pickup. She's got a few more lonely miles yet. The demeanour hasn't changed. Still very strong.
Well, let's get an idea, a perspective of women's distance running over the years. And again, this is focusing on races, women's only races. 2:15.25, which Radcliffe ran here in 2003. 2:17.18 when she won in 2002, and then that 2:17.42. Now, Ketani, 2:18.37. She's number 2 on the list. Catherine Ndereba, another Kenyan, 2:18.47 when she won in Chicago in 2001. And also look at Tiki Galana, who is down there, her time in Rotterdam, 2:18.58. So, well, certainly Ketani could be on her way to her fastest ever marathon, and who knows, the 3 fastest ever marathons that we've seen run by Paula Radcliffe, well, they are under some threat.
Yes, and I wonder what's going through the minds of Paula. She'll be here in London watching. Just a few more twists and turns. Public a little bit thinner in these sections. There's been a few changes on the course around the Canary Wharf area this year that the organisers have had to put in. A little bit of an adjustment. There's a few sections which are out of bounds for pedestrians as well.
Well, meanwhile, behind, you can see the race is on there, 1:07 and 1:08. Tirunesh Dibaba just leaning into that little bit of a climb. Immediately behind her is Hella Kiprop. This is a race for 2nd and 3rd places. The inexperience of Vivian Chariot, the Olympic 5,000 metre champion, told she was back in 2nd place between Ketani and the rest of the chasers for quite a long time, but really got herself in pretty much the worst possible position, and she's now dropped out of it altogether. But Tirunesh Dibaba, she herself now in that section around Canary Wharf, and that is the race for 2nd spot. And you have to say, Tirunesh Dibaba looking quite strong here. Hella Kiprop always has that same running action with arms and legs apparently going in all different directions. Canada Square up in front of these two. Process of seeing what might prove to be a remarkable performance from Mary Ketani. This is the athlete at the moment lying in 2nd place. Tirunesh Dibaba herself, twice an Olympic champion at the 10,000 metres, the same distance at which she won the world title on 3 separate occasions. But Mary Ketani, who made her bid very early on, she went with a pacemaker just what, about 10 or 15 minutes into the race, and she's been there pretty much throughout. The men's race following a rather more predictable script. 3 pacemakers out in front, shielding the race proper. Kenenisa Bekele, where he's been pretty much throughout. Eyes fixed on the road in front of him. Immediately behind him is Germe Gebrselassie, wearing the same white vest and the black shorts. Also there you can see on the right is the Amsterdam winner from last year. That is Daniel Wanjiru, 2:05.21. He ran in winning that race. He's a very strong athlete indeed. Faisa Lilesa, also tucked in the middle there. You can see wearing that amber vest. Wanjiru, that is, on the right. Also there towards the back, wearing the white vest, that's Abel Karui, the Kenyan. But most of the men here, who we expect to be, are Sefa Mengsu of Ethiopia, a 2:08 athlete who's running at a tempo some way ahead of what we might expect, is also in that leading group. And this, I think, is the race to be the first Briton across the line. I think I can see Chris Thompson in that group. Chris Thompson will be wearing 19. There he is, with those long socks. Also expect Scott Overall to be there wearing 28. That's Ian Kimpton, twice a British Universities champion at the 10,000 metres. He's a 2:15:55 man. Former Oxford University athlete. Coming up here to 11 miles, so they are approaching halfway in the men's race.
Just operating just outside 5 minutes a mile, this group. So around the high 2:10s, low 2:11 pace at the moment, which will be significant personal best for a number of this group. We've seen the likes of Scott gone close to that. Scott Overall 2:10:55, but it'll be new territory for many of the others.
But what is quite remarkable, really, and this is, I suppose, in large part a compliment to the world's leading men and the world's leading women, is that Britain's men are almost caught immediately in that gap, right in the middle, between the elite women and the elite men. We've got the elite men here running at times of 2:03, something like that. We've got the elite women who maybe, just maybe, running 2:16, 2:17, something like that. And tucked in between them, around about 2:10, something like that, are the elite men. And we talked about the progression, Steve, of how men's marathon running has come on, and now we're getting more and more races being won in 2:05, and we're getting the 2:04s and the 2:03s. But it's a bit of a sore point, I suppose, for UK athletics, but marathon running has really pretty much stood still in Britain, hasn't it, since your day?
Well, we've had a few exceptions along the way. Yeah, in the 90s, there were obviously Steve Jones started the ball rolling, and that really set the bar high, and behind him came some significant athletes. But it is a worrying time, but we're coming out of it.
So there we are, familiar sights. You can see the Shard, slightly obscuring our view there of Tower Bridge, and out there to Canary Wharf, and you can get some idea if you don't know the course very well. Here we are, athletes streaming across the bridge, making their way towards halfway. This is where the elite men are right now. The elite women, well, they're turning out of Canary Wharf and heading back towards the Tower. So the elite men and the elite women could well come eyeball to eyeball at one of those sections in East London as they come down, make their way down one side of the road. Here they are, coming from south to north, across the bridge.
Just up this slight upward slope, you see him just leaning into it a little bit. 20-kilometre marker, just after the second stanchion there. Again, great crowds here supporting this affair. The elite men here safely negotiated the drink station. That's why they are now split up. Single file into and out of the drink station has just seen the elongation of this pack. Our last split over the bridge, 20 kilometres, was 58:30. And that's a far more meaningful split there. Halfway, 61:41. So just falling a little way behind, 15 seconds behind the pace set by Kipchoge last year for the course record. Of course, he put some stunning kilometre splits. Went through the halfway, and then he really pushed the pace hard. Meanwhile, back to the front of the ladies, and it's Mary Keitany still looking strong, still looking focused. The eyes have dropped a little, but she's still moving comfortably, hugging that blue line, shortest distance. The ever-present motorbikes with the press, the media, the cameras, and the chasing athlete here.
Yes, Tirunesh Dibaba is looking quite comfortable, but certainly as things stand, and with each passing step almost, Mary Keitany, we can become more and more confident on her behalf that the wheels aren't going to come off as they did, I remember, once in New York. She's gone out there with a purpose and clearly confident in her own ability. Now, Tirunesh Dibaba, a long, long way behind, and perhaps quite literally in another postcode. But in terms of quality, Mary Keitany putting a huge amount between herself and the chasers. And I place chasers in inverted commas because I'm not sure they are chasing anymore. That final mile, clock there in 5:19. But we could well be seeing one of the great women's distance running performances this morning from Mary Keitany. Paula Radcliffe's world record, run in male company, 2:15.25 on this course, 14 years ago now. Radcliffe also ran women's only races very, very quickly indeed when she won here in 2:17.42. But Mary Keitany, who is the world's second fastest ever female at the marathon, well, she could well be improving her best time when she ran 2:18.37, winning here 5 years ago. But certainly with each passing kilometre, Mary Keitany's performance is looking better and better and better. Tirunesh Dibaba, don't forget, this is a woman who has won 5 global titles on the track, 2 of those at Olympic level, 3 at World Championship level, world record holder at 5,000 metres. She is one of the great women's distance runners, is Tirunesh Dibaba, but on the road here, she quite literally isn't in the same postcode as Mary Keitany. And you have to say, well, she maybe is starting to look a little bit tired, but that shouldn't come as an enormous shock. She's been running on her own, or at the very most with a pacemaker, for something like 1 hour and 35 minutes now. Well, maybe the heat's being applied here in the men's race, and Germe Gebrselassie, who I said might be a bit of a threat, well, just losing a little bit of ground there. You can see alongside Wanjiru and also Kirui. So they are 3 of the principals in this race.
Without a doubt, you can see the cadence has improved, the stride length. And a few words between colleagues there.
Tilhan Ragusa, 2:05.27 man. He in this leading group, he's certainly among the favourites here. Well, I'm just looking there at Kenenisa Bekele. Is that Bekele right at the back of this group? Well, it's an unusual development here if Bekele, who has been running throughout in the immediate wake of the pacemakers, well, where is Bekele now? Is that him right at the back, wearing the white vest? He's got Gebrselassie in front of him. That's Menksu behind Lilesa. Also, you can see Wanjiru wearing the blue vest on the right. Here comes Abel Kirui, twice the world champion, tall figure there wearing the white. And it looks like Bekele, but he's right at the back of that group. So, well, this is an interesting development as they move into the second half of the race.
Just minutes ago, there were a few words passed to each other. The pacemakers, though, are diligently keeping with their pace and looking very comfortable, running stride for stride. But there is some destruction of that group behind. Some meters starting to creep in between athletes. Stress. Some brows are being crunched up. To eager look backs there, just seeing where everyone is. Of course, this was the stage last year, as we mentioned earlier. Kipchoge put the hammer down, and it looks like again.
Well, it's one of the men who, throughout the first half of the race, found himself tucked in well behind Lesser, you can see, wearing that almost amber vest, who is now kicking on, the world bronze medalist from Daegu. That was in 2011. Looking very strong indeed now. Also, over on the far side of the road, you can see Abel Karui. Alongside him is Daniel Wanjiru, wearing the blue vest, the Amsterdam Marathon winner. And also Asefa Menksu. But then there's a gap, and this gap is, well, it's a little alarming, isn't it, for followers of Kenenisa Bekele. There he is. Behind him is Gebre Selassie. Immediately in front of him is Tilahun Regassa. In fact, behind him there is Regassa wearing the blue vest. But Bekele, you'd have to say, I think he's starting to look a little distressed here, as is Gebre Selassie.
Yeah, there's a little tell in. He just pinched the top of his thigh there, where there's a little muscular cramp in his quad muscles. But yes, if you're going to win the London Marathon, you do not let athletes get away at this stage. Unless you're very confident and comfortable, but that is not the face of a confident athlete at the moment. Little look at the watch there by the pacemakers.
Well, these pacemakers have done a tremendous job, but it's Lesser who's making the bit at the front. Lesser 1, Wanjiru 2, Karui 3.
But as you said, Dibaba there looking very sprightly. I think she's got too much to do on the distance and too short a distance, but she's making a great race.
But as things look at the moment in the women's race, just talking across pictures, we're maybe looking at a winning time somewhere around about 2:16, 2:16:30, something like that. Here we can see the leading men after 25 kilometres. The pacemakers, they are singled out, but looking prominent here are one or two names who you probably think are from the second tier, if you know what I mean, the second tier of elite athletes. Wanjiru, very impressive winner in Amsterdam at the end of last year. You may well have watched that on Eurosport. We thought that he might go on to greater things. Who knows, maybe Daniel Wanjiru might be the surprise package here as Lesser just drops back. But the question marks are about this man here, Kenenisa Bekele, wearing one on his back, and that is now a gap of something like 30 metres to the athletes ahead of them. Now, among that quartet is Gebre Selassie, Germe Gebre Selassie. Germe is on his bib, and he's the reigning world champion. But these are the athletes up ahead of them on the road. The white vest there being worn by Abel Karui, 2 times a world champion, very tall and rangy athlete. They're wearing the white vest. But it's the form of Lesser and Wanjiru who is now leading the race proper. And they've been going now for an hour and 14 minutes, so somewhere in the region of about 50 minutes of running left for these men. And the gaps that they're opening, well, starting to suggest here that there may be, as winners at least, the races of Gebre Selassie and of Kenenisa Bekele may well be run.
And it's definitely Wanjiru who is matching the pacemakers. Another glance, prescribed pace going on here, but 50 minutes running to go. They're operating about 2 hours, 3 minutes 30 pace, because that can all change both up or down. It could get faster, although it is the cadence looks very sprightly at the moment. But that second pack, it is just every 100 metres they're losing a few more metres.
So let's just identify the leading athletes at the moment. Daniel Wanjiru, the man who's 24, best of 2:05, 21. Ran that when he won the Amsterdam Marathon. They're wearing the blue vest on the right-hand side. He leads. Then in second place, it's Fayisa Lilesa of Ethiopia, a 2:05 or 2:04.52 man. He did run that 5 years ago. He's got plenty of experience in London, but this perhaps his best chance of ever winning it. Karui just being passed there. That's Abel Karui, 2 times the world champion. 4 athletes out in front here. This is the second group, and to give you some idea of that distance, well, something like 50 or 60 meters down on the road, something like that. Germe Gebrselassie leads this trio here. Kenenisa Bekele is there in second place, came here as the race favourite, and it's Asefa Mengsu wearing 10 who's lying in third there in that second group, but 7th in the race overall behind the pacemakers.
And interestingly, they're all Ethiopian, of course. Whether they are working as a little bit of a pack, whether they do feel it's a little bit fast, but 2:03 pace shouldn't be beyond them. Still a fantastic running, but as we had some of the protagonists here, you know, Bekele was and is at 2 hours 3 minutes 3 seconds, a personal best, should be in the zone.
The athlete we have mentioned there lying in 4th place is Badan Karoki of Kenya. Now he's a debutant at this distance, so he really could be the joker to come out of the pack and spring a surprise. He finished 5th in the Olympic Games 10,000 metres in London when he finished behind Mo Farah, Galen Rupp and the Bekeles. He then finished 4th in Beijing in 2015 at the World Championship. So he's got an outstanding record on the track at 25 laps of the track. How does he go at 26 miles around the streets of London? Well, Karoki is having a dream debut. So at the moment it's Wanjiro 1, Lilesa 2, Karui 3, Karoki there in 4th place. Then a gap to a trio who include the race favourite Kenenisa Bekele. Mary Katani on the embankment. She's come through the city, she's come through the passage of the tunnels, but this is where the undulations, as she goes under the tunnels along the embankment, well, if there are 1 or 2 fragilities, 1 or 2 cracks in the armour, this is where they may get exposed. But Ketani's lead is around about a minute, maybe a little bit more. Here is Tirunesh Dibaba, and I reckon, well, judge what you can from those images, but I do wonder if she is starting to feel a little bit of distress here, because Dibaba was there, she certainly is. She was looking very strong just a couple of moments ago, but Steve, Tirunesh Dibaba, maybe it's just one of the climbs here, because there are quite a few of these out of the tunnels. She's now beginning to look in a fair degree of pain.
Yes, clutching her stomach. She was so fluid just a few minutes ago. We thought she was reeling in, Mary Katani, but that pace, that effort has really taken its toll on this little climb up onto the embankment. Not much, but just enough to change the cadence, and you can see she is now in a fair bit of discomfort, clutching her sides, both sides, possibly a stitch. This is where the pushing of the barriers in training back, and she's extended herself this morning in the quest to catch Mary Katani.
So now, oh, she's stopping, is Tirunesh Dibaba. Well, you have to wonder now whether she'll finish at all. She's certainly vulnerable here. Her second place may well soon be disappearing, but Mary Katani, who is out on her own now, and barring some awful mishap, is going to win her 3rd London Marathon. She is going to join that elite club. The likes of Ingrid Christiansen, who dominated this race. Oh, it's going a long way back now, the days of Ingrid Christiansen, back to the 80s. But here is Ketani, and it's now Ketani against the clock. Inevitably, the mile clockings are slipping towards 5.5 minutes a mile. But still, a very good chance here that Mary Katani will run not only her fastest ever marathon, but start to break up the dominance at the top of the tree in terms of the all-time rankings of Paula Radcliffe. Radcliffe's 2:15.25 run here, that is the absolute world record, set in a mixed men's and women's only race, but she ran here 2:17.42. when she won a women's only race, did Radcliffe, and that was in 2005, going back 12 years. And certainly that performance is under scrutiny and very vulnerable here if Ketani can keep going.
Yeah, she's still holding her form well, still driving those legs, although she's a little bit fatigued in the quads. She's still covering the ground. And she has looked good. It was a gamble. Looks like it's going to pay off. But another 10 minutes, under 10 minutes to go, if all the splits are to be believed.
Well, nobody enjoys seeing an athlete in distress, as we saw Tirunesh Dibaba, but it is an illustration of how this event can bring even the best to their knees. Dibaba, twice an Olympic champion on the track at 10,000 metres, an event for which the preparation must be meticulous and, believe me, very, very hard work, running at the sort of tempos that world-class athletes do for 25 laps of an athletics track. But there is certainly a quality to the standard marathon, the 26 miles, 385 yards, that when you get taken into those last 3 or 4 or 5 miles, you are taken somewhere in running terms that you've not been before, certainly however good a track runner you are.
Yes, so 2:9:40, she's now slipped outside. She's lost over a... So yeah, just
so Ketani
covering myself there. No, she's still just under Paula's record, but fair play. Dibaba has picked herself up. She's still running. She had that stitch. She's run it off now, but she is looking at the clock. How much longer of this have I to endure?
Well, the answer is probably something around about 10 minutes for Dibaba, if she is to keep going and to finish second. She is back running again, but clearly still in a fair degree of distress. The last mile at the front, running 5:25, so certainly Mary Ketani running consistent clockings at the front.
Yes, and on for a low 2:17 at the moment. And if she holds her form even a little bit faster, her 40-kilometre time there.
What a performance it's been. She's been on her own, or at the most with one of the pacemakers, for almost 2 hours. The clock ticking on beyond 2 hours 11. Fairly soon she'll turn right. Westminster Bridge will be over to the left, the old location, or one of the previous locations, as a finish area. She'll turn right, head into Parliament Square with Big Ben to her left, then all the way down Birdcage Walk. That's a long stretch. There will be the long sweeping right-hand turn through 180 degrees almost, to then head down the mall and to the finish area with her back to Buckingham Palace. She has something like 5 minutes more of running to go. Just that little rise. She's been past Northumberland Avenue. Back in the old days, that used to be the right-hand turn.
Yes, and that was a significant little climb up through Admiralty Arch, only to be faced with the long mile before the uphill Birdcage Walk. But we can see here Dibaba back into her run-in, but far too much to do. It's been a brave performance. She set out on her own when others fell from the group, and she's given it a go, but she's had to dig too deep to really make any impression on what has been a fantastic performance here.
So Mary Ketani is through Parliament Square. Here you can see those course records. 2:15.25, that world record set back in 2003, the women's only race. 2:17.42, and that's the one which we believe is under some threat here. We consider the 3 fastest marathons ever run by women. All belong to Paula Radcliffe. 2:15.25, the fastest of them. 2:17.18 when she won in Chicago. That was in 2002. 7 or 8 months before she won here in that world record time. Well, Keitany, the 2nd fastest ever female marathon runner, 2:18.37, and well, that time certainly facing revision. She ran that when she won here 5 years ago.
Yeah. 2:18.37 previously, and she is going to take a few minutes off that today. Behind her, back into her flow, is Tirunesh Dibaba. But that little hiccup, that little stomach cramp going through the tunnels on the embankment has paid its toll. 4:53 last mile, and yes, she's slowed. Yes, she's starting to labour. The legs are getting heavy, the thighs really trying to push them on. But this big right-hand turn now, out of the birdcage walk. She's in the last 500 metres, and look at the clock, 2:15.5 with about 500 metres to go. Amazing running.
Well, I think we're about to see the 2nd fastest ever women's marathon. That's how good this is. Keitany set to become the 4th woman here to win this race on 3 occasions. Ingrid Christiansen, she won it 4 times, starting in 1984. Katrina Dore, she won it 3 consecutive times between 1992 and 94. And the other one, well, rather predictably, Paula Radcliffe, 2002, 2003, and then 2005. Keitany joining that elite band, but now here, looking to duck inside 2:17. It would be if she can do that, and it's going to be very, very close indeed. Just the 2nd time anyone has ever broken 2:17 for a women's marathon. It will also be the 1st time it's ever been broken in a women's only race. It's going to be incredibly close. You can see she's inside the last 100 metres now. Mary Keitany. It is a stunning performance in the capital. The clock ticks on. Can she get inside 2:17? I'm sure she's going to do now. It's going to be very, very close indeed. One final effort. Mary Keitany has done it.
What a finish, what a race. How brave was that? Set out very early on, set her intentions, and she has delivered. She's dug deep mentally, physically, and very close to the 2:17, 2nd fastest woman ever. What a great day for her.
Well, it was interesting, wasn't it? Because when you saw the clock that we have there in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, not entirely synchronised with that one, which is above the finish line. But one thing we certainly can say, that's the fastest ever time in a women's only race. And look at this. And it does make you wonder, if she hadn't had that cramp, whether Tirunesh Dibaba could have got very, very close to Keitany.
Without a doubt, and this looks possibly the future for marathon running. She's definitely not got it quite right, but under a minute behind Mary Keitany for all her problems, and the early, more sedate pace leave her thinking, could I have gone with her? Should I have gone with her? Who will know? It'll come down to the next time they meet.
Well, at this time this morning when she set off, Tirunesh Dibaba, she'd have probably thought that that time would have been good enough to win, because before this morning, the only woman to have ever run faster than that time was Paula Radcliffe. We've now had 2 more, with Mary Keitany coming through, the fastest ever time in a women's only race. Tirunesh Dibaba comes in 2nd place. It has been a women's race which has been out of this world.
So there are going to be somewhere between 39,000 and 40,000 finishes today in the full marathon distance, with the wheelchairs, the Parallel Cup finishes, and only the first 2 elite females. We are right at the sharp end.
Well, it has to be said that maybe Paula Radcliffe's time there at the top with that 2:15.25. Maybe it's time, maybe running short. And you do wonder what Mary Keitany's plans are. Perhaps, I think the obvious one is maybe for her to go to Berlin, isn't it?
Berlin, a little bit faster, a little bit... Weather can be kinder, but it looks like the conditions out there have been superb today. The leaves hardly moving there on Birdcage Walk, so we see the third place runner coming down the Birdcage Walk, which just demonstrates how far these two athletes would set massive PBs this morning and put them to the top of women's marathon running.
Well, Selefesh Mergia herself, a sub 2 hours 20 athlete coming through here. So the Ethiopian, set to be the second Ethiopian across the line. As I said, she's a sub 220 athlete. She's going to be outside that today. But it's another fine performance for the world bronze medalist from 8 years ago. She's been around a long time as Selefesh Mergia. And you can just see in the distance, it looks like Vivian Chariot, who I think is coming in for fourth, the Olympic champion on the track at the 5,000 meters. That's her, I think, in the distance there, on the left-hand side with the long yellow socks.
And she's hung on well. She didn't look full of running last time we saw. She tried to bridge that gap quite early on, moving into the 10 kilometer splits point, and it didn't work. She went back to the pack. She's hung on for a very strong performance. 600 to go here for Mergia. 3 times winner of the Dubai Marathon. And rightful winner of the 2010 London after Shubakova was taken off the records.
So Selefesh Mergia coming in for third place. One final turn, a long right-hand turn with the pallets to her left.
And yet again, it's been a African dominance. Kenya, Ethiopia. Marshalling the athletes round to the right.
Sending it just a little bit further out.
Well, they're all actually individually measured. So there's adjustments made for every one of those different approaches into the finish line.
It's quite an art, isn't it, course measurement?
Hugh Jones, the IAAF course measurer, will be out. He'll be now
former winner of this race.
Very much so. Many nights, of course, the best time to do it is when the traffic is at its lightest. So they do it in the darkness. And as I mentioned, year on year, all sorts of little adjustments that go on without the knowledge of so many people. That blue line so crucial these days with all these sophisticated satellite systems of running long races, short races. But of course, that blue line is the only distance that is 42 point.
So Selefesh Mergia coming in for third place. Kenya 1, Ethiopia 2. And with pain etched across her face, it'll be Ethiopia 3. So just outside 2:23. Very respectable time, a time which has been good enough to win this race many times in the past.
And from a high altitude in Ethiopia, Waliso in central Ethiopia, over 2,000 meters high.
So here comes the debutante, Vivian Chariot, Olympic champion at the 5,000 meters. 4 Olympic medals she's won in all on the track, making her debut at the full marathon distance here, and she's finishing strongly. And certainly, that's a very decent start to her marathon career. Picked the wrong race, I suppose, in some respects. Was perhaps never going to be in the same league as Katani on a morning like this, but Vivian Chariot has run a time there that would have won many marathons in 2017, and many high-class marathons at that. Well, when Giroud, Amsterdam winner last year, kicking on ahead here. Abel Karui it is in second place in the men's race, and we reckon they've got something like 24 minutes to go, something like that. So it is when Giroud out in front, Karui in second place, Karoki, the debutant, they're in third place at the moment. What a major step up it would be for Daniel Wanjiru were he to win here. He's broken the hour for the half marathon, has Daniel Wanjiru. But that's not a winning lead at this stage of the race. Something like 10 metres maybe ahead there of Abel Karui. Badan Karoki running his debut about a similar distance back there in third spot. And this is the race now for fourth, with Bekele, well, starting to come back. Just coming past there, Germe Gebrselassie. So the leading five in the men's race as we move into the last 20-odd minutes. So a little more than 4 miles to go, less than 5 miles remaining in the men's race now. It's Daniel Wanjiru who leads. In second place, it's Abel Karui. In third place, it's Badan. And there is just a sense here that Bekele is starting to make up ground. You can see the leader out in front. It's about 50 metres. There is Wanjiru. You'd have to say, at the moment, looking strong. So we're into the last 5 miles of the men's race in London. Enjoy the finish very shortly. Well, we're starting to see some developments in the men's race. Daniel Wanjiru, whose lead at the front was only about 10 metres. Well, a couple of moments ago, he looked over his left shoulder, and he must have been staggered by what he saw, which was a huge gap. The athletes in second and third, Abel Karui and Badan Karoki, have started to struggle, and now the only man on the course in the leading group who's running at anything like the tempo of Daniel Wanjiru is Kenenisa Bekele. On that split there, something like 14 seconds behind. And I think that's probably a fair representation. He's almost 100 metres behind Wanjiru, but Wanjiru, Steve, looks to be full of running. This is a very special day for this man, who has never run a marathon with this sort of profile before.
That's right, he made big steps in his last outing in Amsterdam, knocking 3 minutes off his best, but here it's even a bigger step up. You can see the athletes here trying to match each other, trying to bring this leader out, but it looks like he's kicked for home. They've just gone through the 35-kilometre markers in 1:43.42. So that's going to bring them home with the 2:4. But there's still some racing to go in this. They're all split up by 30-40 metres apart. And you can see Bekele there. Has raised his game. Chasing the heels. But meanwhile, out in front. A little bit of perspiration. Skin warm. A lot of effort. You can see a spray there being put out by some of the spectators. Great crowds here yet again, London delivering. As the thousands are going the other way on the highway, here we have Daniel Wanjiru kicking for home.
He's looking very strong, you have to say that, although I do get a sense that Bekele is starting to eat into that lead. I guess the question is, if he is at all pressed, what has Wanjiru got left to deliver? How much is he running within himself? Is there maybe a little half gear that he can crank up? Wanjiru out in front, Karoki the debutant at the moment in second place, but just looking back there I could see Karoki just start to wander around the road a bit. Look at him. He's moved from one curve to the middle of the road. and he's starting to look over his shoulder. He's sensing there that Bekele is there, and in a couple of moments' time, well, the questions are going to be, one, can Wanjiru hang on? Two, what has Bekele got left to deliver? You have to wonder what happened to Kenenisa Bekele, because he was in the front rank immediately behind the pacemakers, coming up to halfway when he came across the bridge. But then, well, there was a break made by Lelesa, the Ethiopian, his Ethiopian teammate. And at that point, Bekele found himself right out the back of that leading group. But here he is now running strongly again, and now about to move past Kuroki. And you have to say that he's looking strong again, isn't he, Bekele? And I reckon he's probably the fastest man on the course at the moment.
Without a doubt, striding in these last strides before the carriageway splits. And of course, Bekele's been here before, upper 10th Street, lower 10th Street, those little dips, those little inclines that we saw Dibaba struggle on. But he's definitely got a focused look, looking at the road 5 meters ahead of him. The leader, Wanjiru, just gone out of sight around this curve. Be passing the Tower Bridge back on their left.
Well, he's the world record holder at 5,000 metres. It's about that sort of distance that he's got left now.
And about 40 to 50, perhaps a little bit more, 60 to 80 metres there. But he's definitely eating into that lead. Looks like the experienced runner has paced himself well. So
Bekele looking strong, and certainly now the only threat to Daniel Wanjiru. But what a threat he might be. Wanjiru cannot afford to let up. Coming past the tower now, heading off towards the embankment. So close to 149. Wanjiru, maybe for the first time, starting to look just a little bit distressed. Distressed, I suspect, as much as anything, by the prospect of Kenenisa Bekele starting to catch him. Because Bekele certainly is. That gap was 100 metres. It's now down to something like 35 or 40. And they have something like a 5,000 metre race to go. Bekele, the world record holder at that distance. The man who has justifiable claims to call himself the greatest distance runner there's ever been. Haile Gebrselassie might dispute that. So too maybe even Mohamed Farah. Maybe one or two people from yesteryear. But Bekele is right in there among the great names of distance running. If you go all the way back to the likes of Paavo Nurmi, up to Emil Zatopek. More recently, I suppose, the likes of Lassie Viren and Haile Gebrselassie, whose success spans so much distance and so many distances, and also, of course, all three major surfaces, road, country and track. But Bekele now sensing that the race is there for the taking. He's looking very, very strong indeed. Came so close to a world record in Berlin a few months ago. Had that collision early on in Dubai at the start of the year. Clearly gone through a little bit of a rough patch in mid-race here. But now he's looking commanding, and you have to say, Steve, there is a sense it's only a matter of time now before he catches and passes Daniel Wanjiru.
I think yes. However, the marathon, the unpredictability of it all, although a little sneaky look around, Wanjiru, has he got anything left? Is there anything left? He's untried it, let alone at this pace. Has he got any racecraft left in him? Has he got any dog and determination when it gets into those last kilometre or two? But yeah, I think that is closing slightly. It looks like now it's down to sort of a 40 metres. And they'll go into lonely isolation now, into these tunnels. The echoes, the footprints, the whirring of the bikes is all they hear. And that little pull out of the bridges will be a big factor.
Well, this is going to be a very strange experience because they're going to go out of the sunlight and the din, the persistent roars coming from the roadside, and in a moment the only noise they'll hear are the echoes of their own foot strikes as they go through this long tunnel which takes them from the City of London beneath Blackfriars and out towards the Victoria Embankment as they head towards Whitehall and towards the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben.
But you're right, the money should be on Bekele as he goes into the last few K with his track background, 3000s, 5000s.
And it stands to reason that leg speed is blunted by having been out there for the best part of 2 hours running on the roads of London. But when it comes to leg speed here, there is just no comparison. Bekele's a man who could compete at a world-class level at 1500 metres, a man who's won short, sharp track races in some of the great arenas around Europe. He's won Olympic titles and world titles on the track.
But we're really in store here for a great showdown on the embankment. Little gesture there, waving to the crowd.
Well, that's how much confidence he has. I think he's sensing it's just when, rather than if, he picks off Daniel Wanjiru. That's how good he's feeling. And to give you some idea of this man's ability, when he won the Olympic 5,000 metre title in Beijing, that's 9 years ago, he ran a sub 4-minute mile at the end of that 5-kilometre race. And here he goes into the darkness. And what price, when he emerges from it, is actually in front? Who knows? Perhaps it's a little bit sharp, but you would have thought he'll certainly be in the lead by the time he hits Parliament Square. Look at the comparison there, the almost staccato stride there of the taller man, Wanjiru. Very economical, suited of course to the marathon. But Kenenisa Bekele on Wanjiru there just looking over his shoulder. It's desperately difficult to avoid that temptation to actually have a look at where Bekele is. But that in itself will just see the confidence rising and oozing within Kenenisa Bekele. Wanjiru looking all over the road at the moment. He needs, however strong the temptation is, he just has to keep on focusing ahead of him. It's still a decent advantage before Bekele comes past. It's something like 30 metres. And of course, these little climbs, which are a feature of the embankment, going under the bridges here, that's probably just about the sharpest incline on the marathon course that's coming up. It's all relative, of course, but believe me, when you've been out there for almost 2 hours, you feel this, however good you are. That little sharp rise where the road beneath you isn't working for you, it's really working against you in this section.
But you do have to ask yourself, was it tactics? Was the pace just too high? You would have thought somebody of the calibre of Bekele wouldn't have let this athlete go. And he's still a bit of an unknown. We still don't know, has Wanjiru got anything in the bank here? It's tantalisingly, although it's coming down, it's not a done deal here. If there's another gear, it is going to be a fantastic finish up round through to Birdcage Walk.
Well, you have to say, over the course of the last mile, there's been no indication that that advantage has been cut at all. So Wanjiru is doing a remarkable job here. But if there is one man out there today who can bridge that gap, who can finish incredibly strongly, it is Kenenisa Bekele.
But he is running out of time. Yes, he's got that 50 metres to pull back. We're going to see an inspired Wanjiru now as he turns the corner. Hopefully he's seen this area of the course. Hopefully seeing the slight little climb, as Big Ben will be towering above him. He'll take that big right turn.
Yes, Wanjiru's always been a good marathon runner, but his first appearances didn't give any real indication that he was going to come up with anything outstanding. He finished 7th in Frankfurt in 2014. Now, the Frankfurt Marathon in autumn is a marathon with a profile that's getting stronger and stronger. When Wilson Kipsang came close to the world record there is where it really came on the map, but he finished 7th in that race. And then in Prague, which really is from the 2nd or even 3rd tiers of major marathons, finished 4th there at the start of last year. That's part of the spring program. But then he went to Amsterdam, which again is from the 2nd or 3rd tier of marathons, but he won that so impressively in just outside 2:05, which is a world-class time. And he's only 24, so he's still relatively early in his career. His preparation here, well, he went to Ras Al Khaimah, to that world-class half marathon, finished 12th there. Decent performance. But here he is in London, by some margin his biggest ever step up. And you have to say now that Wanjiru, he was getting caught by Bekele, but now there is no indication at all that Bekele is eating into that lead. He gave a wave to his supporters on the side of the road. Now that, well, have I maybe misinterpreted that? Was that just a Sunday morning greeting rather than I'm feeling great, I'm on my way to victory and I'll do it as I like? Because if he is going to win this, Bekele, he's going to leave it late, and it's going to be the most remarkable finish we've ever seen to the London Marathon.
It is, and although there's a foreshortening of the lens there, he is still getting closer, but he's either hugely confident or he is doing the best he can, and he can't close this gap.
Well, I reckon that gap's actually maybe even increased a bit. But it is 30 to 40 metres, isn't it? Final stop for a drink. I say stop, there's no stopping involved, but just something to get him over the line. Bekele goes for a drink as well. Just that little bit of sustenance to get him towards the finish line with a little more than 2 kilometres to go. We're going to see a fast time this morning. We expected that, but we're not going to see any records broken. It's not like the women's race.
Interestingly, both runners there went to the wrong side of the road, still needed nourishment and refreshment to perk themselves up for this final 2 kilometres. 9 seconds.
But Wanjiru showing no sign of going back here. If Bekele is to win this, it seems very unlikely that he's going to do it as a consequence of the failings of Daniel Wanjiru. Because Wanjiru, that short staccato stride, but it's maintaining the same tempo. The cadence remains high. He's just gone past the embankment tube. That's Charing Cross over to the left. The slight turn in the road. Up ahead now is Parliament Square. There will be the right-hand turn into Westminster.
That gap is diminishing, but they're getting closer to that finish line. It's going to be a super effort for Bekele to get back on level terms.
Looking over his left shoulder, if he wants to get a good view, he should be looking over his right, in all honesty. But Wanjiru now just has something like 3 or 4 minutes. He needs to run the 3 or 4 minutes of his life.
And I don't think that gap is coming down. The last kilometre, it has now been maintained. Wanjiru got still a bit of spring in his step. He's sensing now that the victory may be his. He just needs to hold himself together. Still good cadence. Upper body still pumping those arms. Still very much in charge. The fatigue, the lactic acid must be building up in those quads. He'll have been here before, but not on such a big stage.
Well, it's a bus stop big enough for 3 buses, I think. That's the gap. There's another landmark. There's the right-hand turn. Birdcage walk ahead. Now this is gently downhill. I stress gently. This used to be the home run up to Westminster Bridge, going in the opposite direction, which, as you can gather there, was the final climb over the last 200 metres. But Wanjiru here will be lifted. But is Beckley also being lifted and inspired here? Is this where Beckley starts to make his move? I get a sense that that gap is starting to close again. Well, I reckon it was up to about 30 metres, 40 metres at one point. I reckon it's down to something more like 20 now. When Giroud is being hunted down Birdcage Walk, he will need to find something a little bit extra here, will Daniel Wanjiru. Is Kenenisa Bekele about to pounce? Has he been playing a game all the way along the embankment? I reckon he might have been. He has cut that gap almost in half, I think. Bekele is finishing this like he used to finish one of his 5,000 or 10,000 metre races. I reckon he's poised here to grab victory, and he's going to do it in the last 800 metres of the race. It's basically 2 laps of an athletics track they've got left, not much more than that, and Kenenisa Bekele is going into overdrive.
Little glance by Wanjiru over his shoulder, and he's picked up his game, and all of a sudden he's found another gear. Can these 20 metres be bridged?
Well, I tell you what, if Wanjiru holds off Bekele here, it would be a stunning performance, but that gap halved in an instant. It really did. It didn't take long. Daniel Wanjiru, this could prove to be the greatest day of his life. He's never run in a race like this. He needs to stop looking over his shoulder, however much the temptation might be. He's got one of the world's great, if not the world's greatest, distance track runner hunting him down.
700 to go. As Bekele left it too late, we've seen some fantastic finishes over the years in the mile. The last 200-300 metres being covered in blistering speed, but here's about attrition. And has Bekele underestimated how much Wanjiru had in the bank, how much he had in reserve? He's running like a man possessed. This could be the biggest day of his life so far.
Well, he keeps on looking behind him. That will only give more encouragement to Bekele. And now, well, has Bekele given up the chase?
I think so. I think the arm carriage, I think he's realised that gap is a gap too far to be done just with 400 metres to go.
So this is 350, 400 metres, being instructed to go wide around the cones here. Bekele looks as if he might have just about got this one wrong. There is no doubt that that gap of 35, 40 metres was cut in half in that right-hand turn, the top end of the embankment through Parliament Square, and now Daniel Wanjiru must kick for all he's worth. 200 metres remaining. Bekele has been beaten, and the Amsterdam champion from last year has stepped out of the marathon shadows. The latest star of marathon running. He's not going to run as fast as he did in Amsterdam, but this, by some margin, the most significant victory of his running career. Victory for Kenya in the women's race. Victory for Kenya in the men's. Daniel Wanjiru is the London champion. Bekele, well, in the end, he just came up short.
Was it a misjudgment? Was he too confident? One of the few times the hunter just didn't quite get his prey. He'd had him in his sights for so long, but it was just that 30, 40, 50 metres too far. What a great race.
So Daniel Wanjiru, the men's champion. Well, I suspect it's going to be quite a wait. But the third place athlete, there was nobody else moving particularly quickly on the road, certainly not among the leading 10 or dozen. So here's our winner, Daniel Wanjiru, a winner in Amsterdam on Eurosport back in October, and here he is in April in London, in this arguably the biggest road prize of all. He is the Virgin Money London Marathon champion.
And still only 24, 10 years younger, so still got many great years ahead of him.
So Bidan Karoki, on his debut, has kept going. And he should just about hang on to third place, ahead of the two-time world champion Abel Karui.
And I think he knows what the marathon distance is all about. The legs have really tired, the quads have gone. He's just about hanging on to this finish line to take a great third place.
And Karui comes through in fourth place. So 3 Kenyans in the first 4.
Big broad grin there. Little does he know what's got in store for him now. Endless press conferences, interviews, all over the newspapers tomorrow morning.
So, chance to look back, Steve, and consider what we've seen this morning. I guess, and perhaps the first time we can say this, since the great days of Paula Radcliffe, we've seen the men's race in terms of headlines and achievement eclipsed by the women's.
That's right, the time wasn't as high a standard as it has been in London, but a great front-running expo. It was a great front-running exhibition by Mary Keitany today. You know, the likes we haven't seen for years, and it will be hard to beat. And she's there for the future, I think. The wheelchair, we've never seen so many wheelchairs come down the mall together. And to see David Weir come out of the pack and take that line, well deserved. The power took him right through. And then the men's race has been a great race, not the fastest race. It won't put them on the map in terms of the fast marathons in the world. It's been a great race, great spectacle, and surely kept everybody entertained.